Have you ever been talked about behind your back by an entire group of friends? The feeling of walking into a room and suddenly every conversation stops, every eye avoids you at the same time? It's unpleasant, but you can still go home, still eat dinner, still make it through the day. Now imagine the consequences of that same thing 30,000 years ago. Not just an uncomfortable evening, it could be a death sentence. Except no one needed to pick up a spear to carry it out. Her name was Naya. She was 17 years old. Ever since she was a child, everyone in the tribe had quietly assumed that she would eventually live with Tharn, the group's best hunter, the son of the headman. No one had ever formally said it out loud. But that was simply how things had always worked. The daughter of one respected family would be paired with the son of another respected family, keeping relationships within the tribe strong and ensuring that resources continued to be shared fairly across generations. Then, one spring, a group of strangers stopped by to trade goods, staying for a few weeks before continuing their journey. Among them was a young man named Ancient. He wasn't as skilled a hunter as Tharn, but his hands could turn an ordinary stone into a blade so sharp that Naya's entire tribe stood in admiration. Naya began finding excuses to stop by where Ancient sat working. At first, it was just to watch, then to talk. Then, one evening, they sat beside each other longer than they needed to, and neither of them was in any hurry to stand up. It only took one person to see them. You may already be imagining what happens next. Tharn becomes furious, challenges Eshin to a fight, and the two men settle everything with their fists or their spears, with the winner claiming Naya as a prize. It's the familiar storyline you've seen in countless movies about primitive times. Physical strength decides everything, even matters of love. But that is almost certainly not how things actually worked in most hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists. In his 1999 study, Hierarchy in the Forest, anthropologist Christopher Boehm examined dozens of hunter-gatherer societies that survived until relatively recent times and found that these groups almost always took active steps to prevent anyone, including the strongest person or the best hunter, from becoming too powerful or using force to impose personal desires on others. Their primary tool was not direct violence. It was gossip. That's right. Rumors. Whispered conversations. The watchful eyes of the entire community. News about Naya and Ancient spread throughout the camp overnight. No one said anything to her directly, but she began noticing conversations that suddenly stopped whenever she walked by. Her mother never scolded her. She simply let out a long sigh every time Tharn's name came up. As for Tharn, he never challenged Ancient. He didn't even look Naya in the eye anymore. He simply stayed quiet and let the tribe do the rest for him. This is exactly the mechanism Boehm called a reverse dominance hierarchy. Instead of a powerful individual imposing rules on the group, as in later hierarchical societies, it was the group itself that exercised control by withdrawing its approval, withdrawing its cooperation, and withdrawing its shared food. No punches were necessary. All it took was making one person feel that they were slowly becoming an outsider within their own community. And that was a punishment far more frightening than any duel, because in a small group of only a few dozen people, where everyone depended completely on one another to survive, being turned away by the entire community was little different from a slow death sentence. No one shared their hunted meat with you anymore. No one stood watch with you through the night anymore. You were still alive, but you were already dead in the eyes of everyone who could help you survive the next winter. Naya understood that better than anyone. So when the oldest woman in the tribe called her to the campfire, she had prepared herself for the worst. But the elder didn't scold her. She asked only one question. What do you want? No one had ever asked Naya that question before. She remained silent for a long time, then answered, her voice trembling but clear. The meeting took place that very evening, with both families present. There were no spears, no fists. Only the elders sitting around the fire, talking for a long time, sometimes heatedly, sometimes in long stretches of silence. In the end, an agreement was reached, not one that completely satisfied anyone, but one that the entire tribe could accept and move forward with. Naya would remain with her family for one more season. Ancient's group would leave according to their original plan. And if, after one season, their feelings for each other remained unchanged, Ancient's group would return, and at that point, Naya's family would formally reconsider the matter. No one won completely. No one lost completely. But not a single drop of blood was spilled. You might think this was just a rare exception, a story retold in a way that is kinder than reality. And you're not wrong to be skeptical. There were certainly tribes, at certain times, where jealousy truly did lead to violence, leaving injuries that archaeologists have found on ancient skeletons. There is no single rule that applies to all human beings across tens of thousands of years. But what makes the idea of gossip instead of fists believable is not that it always happened. It's that it follows a very clear logic of survival. A hunter-gatherer group consisted of only a few dozen people. Losing a skilled hunter because he was seriously injured in a fight, or because he was driven away after losing one, was far too high a price for the entire group to pay, not just for the two men involved in the dispute. That is why mechanisms that reduced violence within the group, such as gossip and councils of elders, didn't exist because our ancestors happened to be naturally gentle. They existed because the groups that relied on those mechanisms had a much greater chance of surviving across generations than groups that allowed internal violence to escalate unchecked. And this is the part that makes Naya's story more than just a small romantic drama around a campfire. The mechanism her tribe used to resolve that conflict, public opinion, collective agreement, the cost of being rejected by the community, is still operating in your life today, only wearing a different disguise. A post that your entire group of friends ignores. A message that no one replies to after a workplace scandal. Your name coming up in conversations you were never invited to join. You haven't been driven out of any cave. But the feeling of having the community withdraw its approval turns out to be one of the oldest fears the human brain ever evolved to experience, even older than the fear of wild animals. No one knows for certain whether Eshan returned the following season. But if you asked anyone who has ever stood where Naya stood, whether 30,000 years ago or tonight, scrolling through their phone and wondering why everyone suddenly went quiet when they walked into the room, they would tell you the same thing. Sometimes, the most frightening thing isn't a spear pointed at you. It's an entire circle of familiar faces quietly taking one step back, leaving you standing alone beside the fire.